That's the other thing that Bob said that I thought was really fascinating, was that there was some documentation that they were showing him that claimed that we are the product of accelerated evolution.
He was shown a lot of shit, and he doesn't like talking about it because he doesn't know if it's just total fucking nonsense.
Right.
You know, he is sure that they showed him shit just to see if he'd fucking say crazy shit.
Right, to see if he'd talk.
All he cares about is what he saw, what he knows is real. But if you do just talk with him privately, they did show him, you know, a photograph of an autopsy of a being with a singular organ. They told him that, yeah, the human genome had been altered, you know, just all sorts of crazy shit. And he just has no idea if it's true or if it's...
God, the whole thing is it's so wild. I just wish, you know, if Bob's lying, my God, what a great liar. Yeah. He's amazing at it.
Right.
And he's been telling the same lie for 30 plus years. And then there's elements of it that, how would he know that? Like, how would he know about element 115? I mean, element 115, when he was talking about it, was theoretical.
Yeah, he got lucky. He's the luckiest guy I know. He always chooses shit that ends up being fucking right.
I know.
You know, that's gravity, funny. Waves, and like, you know, how these crap like, look, man.
Explain the element 115 to people, because people who don't know what we're talking about, that haven't seen the documentary or haven't seen the podcast we did together.
So the way Bob understood it was that he was working on power and propulsion, right? So of one of these, we call them flying saucers, you know, fucking alien vehicle.
That looked like this one.
Exactly.
Right here, from Design by Perry.
Yeah.
The one on the desk.
You know, even like aerospace people are like, well, if you know, it's the most ingenious thing is the way he described it, powered. You know, people are impressed by it. I'm like, maybe that's just what he saw. But anyway, so the 115 was the power source, he said. And basically, you know, you put it in and it releases antimatter and creates a gravity propulsion, a gravitational field. And then you had three directional emitters. Look, that's how they think these things operate. Traveling faster than the speed of sound with no sonic boom, all, you know, transmedium, all domain. These things seem to defy typical propulsion. It's not outside of the realm of what we understand. It's outside of the realm of what we can replicate now. One day we might catch up.
And this element 115 that Bob talked about powering this spaceship was only theoretical back in the late 1980s when he first started discussing it.
Right. We hadn't synthesized it yet.
Right. Well, it wasn't synthesizing. It was created by a particle accelerator, right?
Exactly.
It was detected because it was. I think it was.
But we smashed.
Right.
So we kind of synthesized in that we smashed particles together, and then we're like, oh, for like a second, there it was.
Yeah, I think it's a fraction of a second.
Yeah, and Bob always said that if he's right, if it was 115, that's how he understood it to be. If he's right, then we will someday, you know, be able to make a nominal amount of it that will be stable. That's you know, what he says. You got another one of those?
Yeah, you want one?
Yeah, I'll try one.
All right, here we go.
Thanks, man.
Nice. Yeah, the whole thing is just so interesting, man. It never ends.
Yeah, it never ends. It is interesting. I just like...
Until something actually happens, and my thought is like, when something actually happens, how will people handle it? UFO whistleblower could get immunity under new amendment. So this is what you were talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the thing is I know some of the people doing this, and they're like, you know, they want some nominations, man. You know, who should talk to them? Well, you got your own fucking logo there.
There you go, buddy.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, these are Foundation Cigar, JRE cigars. They're good. Shout out to my friend Nick from Foundation Cigars, too. Hooked me up with that cabinet. Got a full humidor up in this bitch now.
Wow. Thank you.
So this element 115.
Yeah.
This is proven by a particle accelerator. And Bob Lazar's claim was that they had a stable amount of this element 115 that had come from this other place. And did they know where this other place was, where this element 115 supposedly had come from? What, another planet?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is like, what he was told, so he's kind of allergic to. But he said that the documents said Zeta Reticuli, like I guess a binary star system or something. That's what were in the documents. Now, if that's true or not, look, remember, he thought it was the U.S. He thought this vehicle was ours.
Right.
And then until he walked inside of it. That's his whole thing. It blew him away. It's hard to buy what someone like Bob is telling you if you don't know the person. You see people in their lives, man.
Like, imagine being him and that actually happening to you, and then you having to go back to reality.
Right.
And tell people or not tell people, just live your life and have the burden of this information, the burden of this thought. Just turn upside down the other way. There you go. Flip the top.
You got to flip the top.
There you go. And then pull down.
Brother.
I mean, the burden of that kind of information, when even discussing it, you seem like such a psycho.
Yeah.
Most people almost instantaneously, other than a real journalist like George Knapp, most people are going to think you're out of your fucking mind.
Yeah. They just dismiss you.
Yeah.
Why would you even do it? Like, what would be your motivation? What would you get out of that?
Well, his motivation was he was seriously worried that they were going to take him out.
Yeah.
Because he knew so much, and they had cut off of his... For folks who don't know the whole story, just give you a brief synopsis. What happened was Bob allegedly was working on back engineering these aircrafts, these vehicles, these spaceships, and in doing so, you have to have a very high level of clearance. Well, with that high level of clearance comes complete government surveillance. So they monitor your phone calls, monitor everything. Turns out Bob's wife was having an affair. So they don't tell Bob that his wife's having an affair, but they cut off his job. They're like, you did too much of a potential to be emotionally unstable. We can't have you working on these top secret, super sensitive things.
Yeah, it's logical.
While your life is probably going to fall apart.
Find out some bad shit. Yeah.
So he doesn't know this. And so they don't give him any information, so he freaks out. And so he starts telling his friends. And he's like, come with me, I'll show you the launch, I'm not lying.
People forget that.
Yes.
He went out and he showed people a craft that didn't look like any normal craft come up right when he said it would.
Yeah.
Over a base that wasn't even known then really well. And a sub-base, an area, not Area 51 proper. He's the luckiest motherfucker in the world. He did it 3 weekends in a row till he got caught.
Right.
So it's just like, man, every time you try to call bullshit on him, I tried so hard on so many things, motherfucker. People think I'm just some fucking believer. I'm not, bro.
The only thing that people have ever called bullshit on him is that he said he might have seen an actual alien. But he said he was walking down a hallway and looked through one of those little tiny windows that's in a door, those little tiny, like 12-inch square windows. And he peered in it quickly as he was walking by, and it seemed like there was a small thing that was sitting on a chair, and there's people standing over it. But he doesn't know if it was a doll. He doesn't know if it was... And so in his mind, he's like, fuck, did I see an alien? Like, what the fuck? But he can't go back. It's not... Like, everything's... If you work on top secret stuff, apparently, everything's very compartmentalized. Like, the people that work on metallurgy don't have access to the people that work on propulsion, that don't have access to the people that, if there is a biological entity, that they examine it.
Which frustrated the fuck out of him, right?
Because he said that's not how you do science.
It's not how you do science.
Right. You have to collaborate.
He says, I wasn't the most qualified person to be there. Maybe they hired me because they could easily dismiss me. He's like, why didn't we have better people on this? People that were more... So he was really frustrated. And he said to me, like, he thought it was a crime against the scientific community. If they have this stuff, like he says, he says it was a crime. And, he talks about that thing through the window. He's so funny about it. I sat him down for long, many sessions, really trying to get it out of him.
Yeah.
He goes, Jeremy, I think they were just obsessed with measurements. I go, what do you mean? And he's like, well, look, there was something in a chair, but it was small. Maybe they were trying to just measure it to see if it would fit in a craft. So that's how he kind of gets around, like, did he see something or not? He doesn't know.
Like, it could have been a doll that they constructed that was roughly the same height as these things were.
He just doesn't want to go there, right?
And so these creatures that were in this vehicle, if there were creatures in this vehicle,
There were 3 seats.
yeah, and he estimated they had to be how big?
Your typical, like what you think of as like a little gray alien, man, 3-4 feet.
Right.
He said they looked like they were made for children.
The seats.
Yeah, and so look, and every time I try to be like dismiss Bob myself, there's something that creeps in my mind. I'm like, hold on. Like I find out that he was telling the truth. Like recently, I had it verified that he did work at Area 51. Like I know I had a guy. I found the guy after 30 years that he wouldn't talk with George, the guy that did his security clearance.
Mm-hmm.
I found him. I talked to him multiple times about this, and he did clearance for Bob for the test site. But even more recently, from people that have position to access that information, it was confirmed. I just want you to know, he worked out there. Now, I have people that were out there that saw him on a Janet flight. Bob worked out there.
And a Janet flight is those unmarked planes that would leave from the Vegas airport and head into Area 51.
That's right. And so here's the deal, man. Like, it's the cumulative evidence about Bob that I, as a friend of his, like I have no reason to doubt him. And all the evidence tells me that it happened exactly like he said. And he's explaining it to the best of his ability. And to his own detriment, actually, before coming on your show, man, he's probably the most hated dude. For some reason, people go crazy about him. They either love him or hate him.
Well, I think your documentary turned a lot of people's opinions about him as well.
Thank you, brother.
But then having him on, I mean, some people still call bullshit. They think like his migraines were convenient.
Oh, come on. You saw
But he was having them. He was having them in the green room before we started going on. He was very nervous about doing it.
Of course, man. He'd been beat up his whole life about this shit. Also, I gave him McDonald's before, and I think his wife was super pissed at me, and I was like, you give him a salad. No, he gets really, like, crushing migraines. But, people that are going to call bullshit on that, we're talking about fucking UFOs. If you're going to call bullshit on a migraine, what are you even listening for?
I didn't feel like it was bullshit.
It wasn't
I felt like the whole thing was uncomfortable for him, for sure. But it didn't seem like he was lying. But, look, there's some people that are really good at liars. But usually when you're really good at lying, you lie about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's a consistency in people's lives. And the deeper I got in, chilling with his mom, chilling with his family, chilling with friends that have known him forever, new friends, every single person. And he doesn't talk to them about UFOs, by the way. Like all that. He never talks about that. Just normal life situations.
Right.
The one thing they all said to me, Bob wouldn't waste his fucking time with making up a story, and he'd probably make up a better one. That in the rest, he would. And Bob always says that. He goes, "Man, I wish I could fill the voids for people." He goes, "It's a horrible fucking story, but it happens to be what happened."
Right.
If I was making one up, he goes, "Man, I got some other cool ideas." Like, you know what I mean?
Right. Of course. And also, it's like if you're a liar, you generally lie a lot. Like liars don't just lie one time in their life, and then you catch them. They're inconsistent. Like he was lying long before there was an internet. He was telling the story long before there was an internet. So if he was lying, like in the late '80s, like there would be inconsistencies in his story. Like he would forget how he said it. He would fuck something up, or
dude, for the research I did for the documentary, like I told him, you got to give me full access to your life, dude. Like boxes, whatever. Don't open them. Let me get all your tapes, everything. Right. I was so shocked. Like people, if they're trying to hide something, they're real careful around you. Just that was not my experience. But here's my other thing: is like, do we have to believe any one single person to understand that this is
no?
Yeah, this is a real phenomenon.
No, but he's one of the more interesting cases because if he's telling the truth, that means that the government has been working on these things for decades and decades, and that they have gotten themselves in this pickle where they can't publicly disclose what they know and what they have access to because they've had all these people work on these things secretly, and they sort of have a long history of hiding information.
Right.
How long were you there?
I'd say about 6 months or so.
And what progress was made while you were there?
Well, we came up with a bunch of reasonably good ideas about how the reactor worked. And one of them was the square base of it was essentially like a cyclotron, which is a small particle accelerator, a circular one. Particle accelerators, linear particle accelerators are just long tube essentially, and they accelerate particles with high voltage and radio frequencies till they reach high speeds. But a cyclotron does that in a small circular area. And there's this very heavy element fuel, element 115, something that wasn't on our periodic charts at the time.
But it is now.
It is now, yeah.
When did it become on the periodic table now, the way the charts now?
I don't remember. Do you remember when they...
2004, Darmstadt, Germany, I think, is where they first fabricated 4 atoms. They lasted 220 milliseconds with the atoms. It's nothing, right? And then it later was discovered a couple more times they could fabricate it. Then they gave it a place then on the periodic chart after that, called it moscovium.
So they told you about this stuff in 1982?
Yeah, well,
No,
we
not
kind of...
1982.
What year was this?
It was 88 and 89 when
you
I
were
was
there.
there.
Oh, okay.
82 is when
82 was
I
when
was
you
at
were at
Los Alamos.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So 88, 89, they told you about this stuff. So this was not like...
No, they didn't tell me about it. That's one of the things that this group came up with. The God, I keep losing my train of thought with this thing.
So this one area, this element 115 was the fuel.
Yeah, it was the fuel.
The world will forgive you for having a migraine. Can I just
It's really
say
hard to think through this. Just give me a minute.
We'll just give you more
I just
booze.
want to say one. Yeah, definitely. I just want to say one thing. Bob, for the last 30 years, people have just been on the attack on Bob. Getting to know him, the personal effects on his life. It's really hard to understand unless you meet his family and his wife. I mean, this is the last thing he wanted to fucking do, was have to talk.
Yeah, we should explain that, Jeremy, that you and I had this conversation. I watched your documentary. We had this conversation, and I said, I have to talk to him.
Yeah.
The document, there's been detractors. There's been a bunch of people that called bullshit on many of the things that you've said, but over time, many of the things that you talked about, even in the 80s, have proven to be true. Things that people said were not true were proven to be true. Element 115 was one of them, right?
Right. Element 115, the fuel they had, was stable. In other words, it didn't decay. It wasn't emitting radioactivity. When they synthesized 2 or 3 atoms of the 115, it did decay, and it was not a stable element. So they're kind of 2 different things. But this is kind of typical. Elements always have, or pretty much always have, stable isotopes and unstable isotopes. Like I think cesium has like 30 unstable isotopes to it. So, hydrogen, for example, you're familiar with hydrogen gas. It's stable. It's not radioactive. But there's also 2 other types of hydrogen, deuterium and tritium. And deuterium isn't radioactive. It's another stable isotope of hydrogen. But tritium is radioactive. Now, they're all hydrogen, but they just have different amounts of neutrons. So it's the same thing with other elements and element 115. Depending on the amount of neutrons it has, designates the isotope, but it's 115. They will continue to take or experiment and try and make 115 at different isotopes, and I'm sure eventually they'll come up with a stable version, but it's the stable version that has the properties that we're talking about.
So they somehow or another had acquired a stable version. Did they say that the stable version had come with this craft?
Yeah, it absolutely came with the craft, yeah.
So at the time, you having a firm knowledge of the periodic chart and knowing what was real and what wasn't real, what was your reaction to having this stable element 115 that wasn't even supposed to exist?
Well, everything was impossible.
Right.
I mean, down to the metal. I did get a chance to look inside the craft on only one occasion, and this was important because where the reactor sat might have been critical to how it operated, since everything operates without any interconnection, so the placement of components might be critical. So they allowed me to go inside and look at it. Again, I forgot where the hell I am.
So you're going into this craft, and what are you thinking when you're inside of it? Like, what are you seeing?
It's a very ominous feeling because first of all, everything is one color. It's like a dark pewter color, and there are no right angles anywhere. It's as if somebody took, I've said this before, somebody took a model and fashioned it out of wax and then heated it just for a short time so everything melted. Everything looks like it's fused together. Everything has a radius of curvature where two items meet. It's a really weird looking thing, but there was almost nothing other than a small foldable hatchway that looked recognizable. Everything was really unworldly, to pick on it, a way to describe it.
So you get inside this thing, and it's designed for something that's much smaller than a human being.
Yeah, you can't really stand up till you get to the very center of it.
And how tall are you?
I'm 5'10".
And what do you think this was designed for?
I'd say something close to half my height.
Wow. So these little 3-foot tallish creatures.
Yeah, and the seats were small too. I mean, obviously it was made, for something small. But there is no, there's nothing else in there. There's just seats, the reactor, and some of the subcomponents. There's no control panels. There's no bathroom. There's no decorative components or artwork or anything that you would recognize or trim. I mean, it's just a very bare bones thing.
You're not seeing any screens?
Well, there are archways around it that are part of the superstructure, and one of the archways can become transparent. When I was in there, there was another group working on one of the archways, and you could call that a screen, more or less.
So through that archway, it would maintain the solidity, the solid, whatever metal it was.
Yeah.
But you could see through it.
Yeah, it just became transparent. Yeah. I saw that happen once or twice before I left.
Did you ask any questions about what the fuck that
No,
was?
there's no asking questions.
There's no asking questions.
No.
But when you watch something become transparent and you realize it's still there, but you can now see through it.
Yeah, I mean, now that's not that impressive. We do have some liquid crystal materials that are like that. They have
seen that in bathrooms.
Smart glass. Yeah, they call it smart glass. So this is just, and I don't know if the craft is made of, an advanced metal or a ceramic. It was cold to the touch, so I would lean more towards a metal.
You're not allowed to ask questions.
No, they work on the buddy system, so I can only exchange ideas and talk to Barry. Now this really interferes with science because science is based on free discussion. And ideally, you get a bunch of guys together, exchange ideas, work on problems, and that's how things move forward. But they're so over-the-top concerned about security, they split everything off, and everybody becomes stagnant. It just destroys any of the progress you can make, or at least makes it go so slow. I think they wind up shooting themselves in the foot.
Which is probably why they arrived at this bottleneck that they needed to get this madman with a jet-powered Honda to come in and see what he could do.
I think that was an act of desperation. I think they wanted someone that thinks out of the box and let's just give this guy a try here because They weren't, and they might have done this 4 more times since, up to the point in time today, assuming they're still working on this thing.
And when you see this craft and you're inside, was there any indication that there was an area that they would use to control it, to pilot it? Was there a pilot seat? There were 3 seats. They sat around, the reactor was in the dead center of it, and then equidistant around there were 3 seats. That's all. There was a large, they're not consoles, they're large rectangular objects, also spaced equidistant around the center. There's nothing on them. There's no buttons. There's no lights. There's no controls. And they look the same color, the same
Everything
thing.
is the same color.
It's just a different shape.
Right. And directly underneath them, there's 3 levels in the craft. The main level is what we're talking about. Directly under that, those are the gravity amplifiers, the big rectangular objects. Underneath them are the gravity emitters that look like, for lack of a better word, a trash can hanging on a pipe. 3 of those. And then the top layer, this is just my personal belief, I think that has to do with a navigation or their version of a computer with some planar panels, sensor panels around the craft that we would call portholes, but they're not portholes. They're just black areas. And I think that just determines its position in space. But I physically was in the center section, and I stuck my torso in the bottom section and hung upside down so I could see how the gravity amplifiers were positioned.
What is the roughly the size of this thing?
It's I don't remember from being there, but after all this stuff was over, I had John Andrews, a guy from the Testers Model Corporation, and we sat down and tried to figure out from what I saw and known sizes of things, and we came up with 52 feet in diameter. And
So
I
it's
think that's
fairly small.
Yeah, so I think that's a reasonable guess.
Now, you said there's 9 of them, and you got a brief glimpse at the other ones. How were they different?
Oh, they looked completely different. One looked like I called it Jell-O mold, and it looked like a classic Jell-O mold with the rippled sides to it. One was a very flat disc, like like a straw hat or something like that. That was sitting up on its edge, and the thin part of it it looked like a projectile had been fired through the edge of it. So I don't know if they were attempting to see if the metal could be penetrated, or if that's where the thing came from. Maybe it was shot down. But that was the only one where I saw there was, actual physical damage to it.
And that one was roughly the same size? They're all...
They were kind of too far away to tell.
And there was several teams that were working on the propulsion system, so there was different teams that were working on these different aircrafts?
I don't
You don't know.
I could only assume.
Right. Now, when you're sitting in this thing and you're looking at this otherworldly craft, your goal is to try to figure out how this thing functions. Your goal is to try to figure out how this reactor. But you would imagine they would give you more time than just one day to check that out.
Oh, it wasn't one day.
Right.
Yeah, Barry was there. I think Barry was sleeping there. I'm sure they had. Now, that isn't weird. Up at the Tonopah test range where they work on stealth fighters, you go, I think, 3 weeks on, 1 week off, and you stay up there too. So it's not weird to stay up at the test site.
Right.
So, I think he pretty much, and he acted like he's been up there for a long time.
Yeah.
But
Maybe he's still there.
Yeah, who knows?
Do you have contact with this guy?
No. Oh, no. I wish I did. I kind of thought he was going to come out after I did.
Right.
And I think I took so much flack and it's so much shit for what went on. I think I wound up helping security there, and everybody became afraid of, doing or saying anything after that.
So what kind of reports did you have to give? So you're not making much progress, right? You're just trying to figure out what this thing is, and it seems impossible.
Well, we didn't personally make them. We were always – there was never a lot of information that we gained. The guy, you would call him our supervisor, his name was Dennis Mariani, and kind of a military-looking guy. And he would routinely pop in, during the day and, hey, what's going on, guys? And he would essentially relay any information, anything new we came up with. He was our go-between, where we presented him the information, then he took it to wherever they were, assembling all the data from everybody.
Now, I assume you're working normal days, like an 8-hour day?
No, it was really weird that I would be only called in on certain times and certain days, and they would be weird hours too. Most of the time was later in the evening. I can get a call at 11 o'clock at night, and they'll say, it's now 11 o'clock. By 11:45, you need to be at the McCarran terminal, and we'll let you know when we have more information.
But what did you do while you were there? If you're looking at this object, this reactor, and you can't figure out what it is or how it works, other than the fact that it works on this element that we don't even know about.
Sure. The thing was what you do with anything. If you're trying to analyze it, all you can do is perform tests. And all we did is try and come up with every kind of test we possibly could. We tested, it violated a lot of what we thought was impossible to violate. One of the first laws of thermodynamics, essentially any machine, any device that operates always makes extra heat. Nothing works at 100% efficient. Even the headphones you're wearing, anything that takes power, some of that power is going to be converted to heat, and it's just wasted. This didn't. I mean, we looked at, back then we had infrared cameras. They're different today, but back then you had to pour liquid nitrogen into the camera to cool the sensor down and get these infrared images you've seen. But it never got, no matter what the load was on the reactor, it never got above the ambient temperature, which is impossible. I mean, you're, pulling out huge amounts of power and nothing ever gets warm. We tried measuring magnetic fields and there was nothing there. So we started playing around with the emission from the emitters, the gravity wave itself, and saw what we could do with it and how it was focused. So we really spent all our time just trying to see what the stuff can do and what we can control.
So you were seeing what it could do, but you couldn't ever figure out how it was doing it.
No, not really. I mean, we really could only use come up with a best guess. And now I can't say we really that I could absolutely state for certainty how anything actually worked.
Now, how did you know at all how they were piloting it? Because they were doing some tests where they were having these things fly around in the sky, and this is what gets us deeper into your story.
Right. I was out there for one test. Right. In fact, I was with Barry in the lab, and Dennis came in and said, "We're about to run a test. Why don't you guys come out?" Or I think he said, "Barry, why don't you come out here and bring Bob with you?" We went out there, and the craft was already outside the hangar and was just preparing to lift off. Now, they were in communication with somebody in the craft.
So there was a person in the craft.
Yeah, there was certainly a person in there. Now, it's not a comfortable place to be in because it's small. So the guy has to be sitting on the floor in the middle, my best guess.
And this is the same specific craft that you worked on? Because that was the only craft that you were in.
The only one that I touched and worked on. And it quietly lifted off the ground, which was incredibly impressive to see.
Quietly or silently?
Well, quietly, because
Did it make some sort of a noise?
It produced a little corona discharge from the bottom. A corona discharge is kind of a high voltage brush, little bluish glow discharge. As it was lifting off the ground, you can hear a slight hiss sound. Now, as soon as it cleared the ground by about 5 or 10 feet, maybe even less than that, the hissing stopped and the blue glow disappeared. So it lifted off quietly and then it hovered silently, if you want to be specific.
Wow. So then what kind of maneuvers was it doing?
It took for that particular time, it took off, moved a little around to the left and right, and then sat back down. The craft itself, they communicated with it with because I saw the guy talking in a regular VHF radio to the person in the craft. And I even saw the frequency that was on the frequency counter of the communication, the transceiver there. But what's weird is he shouldn't be able to communicate with the craft with a radio. The radio wave should bend around the craft. I mean, it shouldn't be possible. Every single thing about the craft and the way they operated didn't make any sense to us. I mean, that's something we talked about for a while after.
Why should the frequency bend around the craft?
Well, you really have to look at the way the gravity wave comes out of the craft. There's the reactor's in the center, and there's a waveguide that goes up to the top. There's actually a small appendage that sticks out of the top of the craft, and it produces a heart-shaped gravitational distortion around the craft. Now, if the craft is sitting in the air and you walk underneath it and look up, you actually cannot see the craft. The light bends around it. You're bending gravity, bends light. It bends radio waves. It shouldn't be possible to communicate with a craft that has an envelope around it that's distorting all forms of energy. But they were apparently in contact with it.
Somehow or another, so through some unexplained way that they
Yeah.
didn't bother explaining to you. So this thing gets up. It just does some very simple maneuvers: left, right, goes down. And did they discuss this with you? I mean, they said they wanted you to see it.
No, they just wanted, no, they didn't discuss anything with me. It sat down, we looked around for a bit, and Barry said, let's go back. We went back in the lab. All we got to do was see it. Fast forward to some months later, I did have the test flight schedule of the craft. Now, they had times they had designated high-performance tests. This obviously wasn't one that was a high-performance test. The high-performance test goes above the mountain range, and they do much more radical moves with the thing. Look, this is a prized item, and they're not doing anything like taking it out of the atmosphere or flying around to other countries or anything like
Right.
that. They just play with this thing right over the test site. But they were doing some radical moves with it. And since I had the test flight schedule, statistically, the amount of traffic in the surrounding areas on the highway was lowest on Wednesdays. And that's why Dennis told us that all the test flights occurred only on Wednesdays, because it'd be the least chance that anyone would see what's going on.
And this was before the government had expanded the forbidden territory around Area 51 and Papoose Lake and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that occurred after my story came out. Then people started going up on the mountaintops and trying to look down into there, and they kind of freaked out and then did the land grab and pushed everybody back. But yeah, I think all that occurred long after that I came out.
Grush
yeah.
said there's frozen bodies
Yeah, yeah.
and that there's a crash retrieval program.
Crash retrieval. That was a big one. That caused a big stir. It's been running for decades, he said. I think he said that the government, in his opinion, based on his interviews, as he was working, I think, with the National Reconnaissance Office, and he was tasked with going around and identifying the programs that were related to UAPs. He said that the U.S. government was likely aware of non-human activities since like the 1930s. Now, what I would say is, based on my years of experience with the government, it's really hard for them to keep a secret, right? And that's a monumental secret. And at some point, it's human activity and human nature. Someone's going to open up their pie hole and talk.
Wasn't that what Bob Lazar did?
Yeah, yeah.
And now when you pay attention to some of the video footage that has been released about these unidentified objects, and when you listen to what Bob Lazar said about how these things operate, it mimics that. Not only that, like the way he described the propulsion method.
Whoa. That's a
Good save.
Yeah, thank you very
All
much.
right.
I set the whole studio on fire.
It mimics what he said. He also talked about, that there was some possibility that there was this crash retrieval program is what he was working on, but he said there was some talk about biological entities.
Yeah, yeah, and there's mixed feelings about how how reliable Bob Lazar was. I mean, sorry.
Yeah.
And so, and it's not a new assertion, right? I mean, there's been
Right.
talk about this before. So,
But that's my point about
Yeah.
secrecy.
yeah, and I think, but if that's, I guess, yeah, my point on that is, not only that people can't keep their pile shut, but there would have been more detailed information. That something would have come out. That again, that's my own feeling. I just have a hard time believing the government is that good at keeping a secret, right? Sometimes it just seems like they can't organize panic in a doomed submarine. So I think that's from my perspective, that's a question mark, right? Could they keep this secret that they've got frozen bodies of aliens sitting somewhere?
Wouldn't you imagine, though, that if there was something like that, that the level of attention to detail to protect secrecy would be significantly ramped up? This
Yeah.
wouldn't be something as simple as developing a new fighter jet where, you have you essentially have these corporations that design these vehicles for the U.S. government. You have defense contractors, and one of the assertions was that these are the people that have access to these things because they're trying to back engineer it. And if you were going to back engineer it, you would do so under the guise of someone who makes those things. It's not like the government themselves are the engineers and the people that are involved. It's people that work for the government and often defense contractors.
Well, contractors, government entities, agencies.
Right.
I mean, look, the CIA was responsible for locating the ground where Area 51 sits, right?
Mm-hmm.
All those years ago. So they would have a role to play. You're right. The commercial world would have a role to play. The defense contractors, others, I'm sure. I mean, it becomes a growing circle of people who would be involved in an effort like that.
But it'd be a fun secret to keep.
It'd be a hell of a secret to keep. But
that would be a fun one.
Yeah.
If you're working on something like that, boy, could I tell you some shit.
You go home, the kids say, "What'd you do today, Dad?" And you're like,
I touched metal that's from another planet.
Yeah, I dissected an alien.
They 3D printed model designed to house 3 foot tall creatures from another galaxy.
But it's, but I think we do also tend to imagine. Look, we can only when we look at when Fravor. It was interesting. Fravor looks at the Tic Tac, right? And Dietrich, and they're looking at this and they're trying to interpret it based on what we know right now, right? So our technological limitations, right, kind of define how we imagine things could go, right? But we only know physics in the way that we know it, right? So it is interesting to think about how we put it, which is how you ended up with little green men, right? Well, if they're aliens, they probably look like us, sort of, but let's make them a little different, let's make them 3 foot tall. But who knows what the hell it looks like out there, right? And it's just, but I guess, we've explored so little of space, right? I mean, we still don't know what's, in all the oceans, right? We're still surprised when we find something in the oceans.
Well, that's what's fascinating also about these stories, that there seems to be these vehicles that can travel into the water as well. Yeah. And this has been documented by video as well.
Yeah, and that's what they first noticed, right? I mean, with the Tic Tac was they noticed a disturbance in the water, right? The water was roiling, and they said the weather was perfect, right? There were no white caps, there was nothing. There was just this one area of disturbance, and that was the first thing they noticed. And then they saw the whatever it was. But again, I go back to okay, I'm buying what Fravor's selling, right? It's just that then we don't have what's at the end of that dotted line. We don't know what it is, but I'm glad that we're exploring it in a more serious way now. I'm glad that the Pentagon, to at least, and maybe it happens incrementally, right? But at least they've come out now. They said, okay, we have ATIP, or the Advanced Aeronautical Threat Identification Program, which supposedly shut down in 2012 or so, 2012, I think it was. Of course, they didn't shut it down, right? They just put it into a different program, and because the threat was still there, right? There's still concern over, okay, what is flying over particularly sensitive facilities, right? There was that swarming, right? Or the swarm that went around the USS Omaha,
right?
I think,
the ones that look like pyramids.
Yeah, yeah. And so there were like 9 of them, or I think at a maximum there were 9 of them, and they still haven't figured out what the hell that is.
But did those things exhibit in any sort of capabilities that are beyond our imagination? I don't think they operated at an insane
movement. Not necessarily. They disappeared in a way that couldn't be explained, right? And a couple of them appeared to just go into the water. To your point about there's been those incidents.
Transmedium devices.
So and they did have radar imagery on these items, but and I think so. Anyway, what they might be, again, it's nothing was solved as a result of the hearing, right? Obviously, and I think people were excited, and they're always excited when there's going to be something like this.